to the official podcast of DogsDaily.com, a Sports Illustrated channel.
Gets to the edge. Sonny Michel will send the Dogs home to the championship game.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you're in the right place.
Anthony Edwards with the jam. Are you kidding me?
Hosted by Dogs Daily writers Jeremiah Stoddard, Kyle Funderburk, and Jonathan Williams.
Here's a pitch. Hit high out into right center with some carry. It's got a chance. This ball is out of here. Tucker Bradley has won it.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. Jeremiah Stoddard, as always, along with my buddy Jonathan Williams here. I'm coming to you right now from Las Vegas. I've been out here this week, so today is Wednesday. In Las Vegas, it's 9:41, but what does that make it out in Georgia right now, Jonathan?
12:41 a.m.
12:41, my man Jonathan is out here on, I guess it's Thursday for you, and it's Wednesday at 9:41 for me. Doing it for the fans, out here staying up for the crowd. I'm out here for a work conference and everything, so my days have been pretty crazy, so we were trying to figure out how we could put one together for you guys this week. And Jonathan came through for me this week and made it possible. So it's, like I said, to me, it's almost 10 o'clock. It's 9:41, but for him, it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. So shout out to Jonathan Williams here for coming through for me. But anyways, I'm going to kind of let him somewhat lead the episode this week because I've been a little bit out of touch. As I was telling him before we came on the show today, I literally left to Las Vegas about 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday after Georgia versus Kentucky. So I've been a little bit out of touch with work and being a little bit far away and stuff like that. So I'm going to let him kind of run the episode. But as always, we're going to give a little bit of a recap of the Georgia-Auburn game with, offense, defense. And then we're going to talk, Kentucky's coming up. It's a big game. I think they were ranked 11th now. I did see that. And, just kind of what it means for Georgia or Alabama losing to, Texas A&M, which, by the way, before the season started, I know we kind of contradicted ourselves a little bit on this, but before the season started, we literally said the game to circle on the calendar this year for Alabama was Alabama, Texas A&M. Guess what? Texas A&M got them. We called it. Now, I will say a couple weeks into the season, about 4 weeks into the season, we looked at it and we said, maybe Texas A&M isn't the team we thought they were this season. They still got Bama this year. But anyways, with all of that being said, I'm going to kick it over to my boy Jonathan over here and let him kind of run the episode a little bit more for us this week since he's a little bit more in touch and in tune with everything that's going on.
Yeah, so obviously it's a big win for Georgia. Anytime you beat Auburn, a big rival in the SEC, that's always going to be a big win. But especially
and it was Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Exactly. It was in Jordan-Hare Stadium, so that's always a big victory for the Dogs to go out there and get an exclamation point of a victory out there. Again, you roll out Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels still not being 100% healthy. He goes 14 of 21 passing. I think he had something like 237 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then also on the flip side, you have Zamir White, like 74 yards for in rushing, 2 touchdowns on top of that. Entire running back room is running really well. I think all 4 running backs that got touches were going over 4 yards a carry. And then on top of that, Ladd McConkey, of all people, has his breakout game against Auburn, had the big 60-yard touchdown reception midway through the third quarter from Stetson Bennett, and essentially it felt like that was a nail in the coffin right there. All momentum just went on the Georgia side. All the air out of an energy in Jordan-Hare Stadium was just deflated at that point, and Ladd McConkey just put the exclamation point down, point blank. And then the defense, as we always say, they did everything that we expect them to do. They absolutely dominated the line of scrimmage. They had Bo Nix running for his life constantly. Tank Bigsby couldn't get anything going on the running game. I think he had like 26 rushing yards or something like that. So basically everything that you expected aside from Ladd McConkey just absolutely going nuts during this game, going like 5 receptions for 130 yards, I think, something like that. So just overall really good showing from Georgia this week, no doubt.
Absolutely. And for Tank Bigsby, I think it was even less than that, to be honest with you. He had net yards of 28 yards and
28.
a touchdown. So he did get that one lone touchdown for him, for Auburn, which shout out Auburn. They scored a touchdown. Shout out to Tank Bigsby. Georgia, I personally, as a Georgia fan, I wanted Tank Bigsley to come to Georgia. Sorry. I'm in Vegas, man. It's been
We
a
get it,
long
man.
day.
Sin City
It's
does
been a
something
long
different
day.
to you.
Yeah, it's been a long day. So if I slur my words a little bit over here, I apologize. But anyways, so he did score that lone touchdown for Auburn. And when before the game even started, I called out the score prediction for me personally was 35-6. And what was it? It was 34-10 or something like that,
Yes.
I think. So
Yes.
it was pretty darn close on that score prediction. So I was kind of proud of that. And it was one of those things that, like, at halftime, I think it was like 17-3, and I was like, you know what? That's right about where I predict the score to be at the end of this game. So I was like, we're kind of on track here, and I was like, I'm feeling pretty good about this. But it was one of those games also that Auburn, like, you couldn't stop and wait and you had to wait until see how it all played out, because you were sitting there going, you're on edge the entire game. It was in the third quarter, I believe, and I was like, finally I could relax a little bit. And when it was like, it was 24-10 or something like that in the third quarter. And I was like, all right, if we score this touchdown here, I think it was going into the fourth quarter. I said, if we score this touchdown, they don't have a chance to come back. When you go into a game like this, I think what was the spread? 14.5, I think, before the game even
Yeah,
started.
something like that by Saturday.
Yeah, on Saturday, I think it was like 14.5. And so you're like, that's a lot of points for a game like this, right? There's nothing to complain about when Georgia wins by 24 points against a SEC West team that's a huge rival that we play every single year. I mean, there's nothing bad to say about that game. Yeah, there was some misplays here and there, some calls that you should have seen go a different way. But I mean, there might have been a few calls that Auburn could have got their way as well. But either way, Georgia won by 24 points, and it's one of those games that, like, no matter what the reffing looked like, no matter what, like, a couple calls here and there was, Georgia was winning that game. When you win by 24, that's a large margin. And it was one of those games that, like, even coming into it at 14.5, you're like, man, that's a lot of points to predict a team to win against a top 25 opponent. Guess what? Georgia's going against Kentucky this coming Saturday, and they're still predicted to win. I think, what was the spread? Last time I
think
saw
it's
it,
at 22 right now, right
22.
around there, maybe 22 and a half.
Yeah, and I think I saw it at 24 or something like that. So it's gone down a little bit. So it's moved a little bit on there. But still, Georgia's going against all of these opponents, and ranked opponents, top 10 opponents against Arkansas. It was an 18.5 point spread when it opened, and ended about 16.5 before the kickoff. And so you have that. Then you have Auburn, who's also a top 25 opponent. And then you have Georgia over here predicted to beat them by 14.5. You have Kentucky now this weekend, was a top, number 11 in the country. And all of a sudden, Georgia is still predicted to win by 22 points. I mean, that's insane. Georgia's now ranked the number 1 team in the country, which we all expected after being dropped. But that's insane, man. 22 points against the number 11 team in a country. That's wild. I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, and the craziest thing is, too, Jamari Sawyer goes down in the middle of the game, and then also on the flip side, you have Christopher Smith, who goes out with injury as well. So you got Dan Jackson, walk-on, starting for this, or not starting, but he's now your main guy over there at safety. And then you have Broderick Jones, a young guy, starting at left tackle. And and so Dan Jackson also ends up being the team's leading tackler at the end of the game. And then Broderick Jones, he holds his own at left tackle. And so now you're getting to see, like, okay, maybe now when Jamari Sawyer comes back, which might be this week, might not. It'll just depend on how that ankle's feeling. Maybe you can put Broderick Jones there now. And now you know that you can rely on Dan Jackson to give you valuable minutes if Christopher Smith isn't ready to go or whatnot, or if he goes down. You now know that Dan Jackson can give you those minutes, that Broderick Jones can step into those big roles whenever you need him to. It's just the depth that Georgia has. It's the depth everywhere. I mean, we have 14 total players, including JT Daniels, banged up right now, dealing with injuries. A lot of them coming from the wide receiver room. You've had guys like Brock Bowers step up, A.D. Mitchell stepped up, Ladd McConkey stepped up, and everybody's playing a pivotal role when their name is called and when you need them in a honestly, I mean, not a do or die situation, but when you need them in a very important situation, especially in the season, going down to Auburn, you know for a fact now, okay, we can call on those guys. We're comfortable. We have a lot of guys that we're comfortable with rotating in and out. Georgia's 3 guys deep at defensive tackle, and the starter is Jordan Davis, who, by the way, is getting recognition of possibly being a Heisman finalist right now, as absurd as it is. There's been a lot of buzz on that on Twitter this week. Does it actually happen? Probably not. But there's been talk about him getting an invite to New York for the Heisman Trophy right now. Which
And
is
maybe
insane.
maybe he gets an invite. Yeah, maybe he gets an invite. I mean, somebody else wins it. Maybe he does get an invite. That's crazy though. But to keep it on like the offensive side of the ball, when you talk about Broderick Jones being able to step in for Sawyer when he gets hurt, he's playing left tackle right there, right? So you still look at Stetson Bennett, who is our second string quarterback at this point. At the beginning of the year, third, fourth string quarterback when he started, behind even Carson Beck originally and JT Daniels. So you look at that and man, now he is, he throws for 231 yards against Auburn when he loses his left tackle. And anyone that watches football and pays attention to it knows your left tackle is extremely crucial for pass protection. That's your quarterback's blind side most of the time. And so when you have him step in and then you still can throw for 231 yards in a game like that, along with being able to rush as a team for 220 yards for all of your running backs, between Zamir White having 80 yards, Kendall Milton had 43 yards, Stetson Bennett had 53 yards or 51 yards rushing, along with James Cook having 35. So like between the team, 220 yards rushing and 231 yards passing for Stetson Bennett there. But Stetson Bennett alone accounted for 281 yard or 280 something yards. I don't know. I don't want to do the math, but something like that right there himself with left tackle, your starting left tackle, who's the most important piece on that offensive line for pass protection, along once again with that rushing attack for 220 yards. That's not a step back. I mean, there's probably a few plays here and there that Sawyer might have been able to step in a little bit more for that. But at the end of the day, you look at it and you're like, that's not a big drop back as far as having somebody like Broderick Jones take over for Sawyer. It makes you feel really good as a Georgia fan and a Georgia media member, looking at it like that. But then again, when you look at the whole picture, how many injuries Georgia's had, Jermaine Burton didn't play in this game.
Yeah.
He was on the sideline. They panned over to him on the sideline and he didn't play at all. That's a big deal when you look at this Georgia team as a complete team. When you look at them being number 1 in the country right now, and you look at those statistic lines against a team like Auburn on the road, who is a top 25 opponent at the time, and you sit here and go, man, this team is complete. Like they have so much depth that they can sit here and have these key pieces missing, and they can still fill in that void and make it something and still be a special team and still beat a team like Auburn on the road by 24 points. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, you name me any team in the country right now that would be in Georgia's position, ranked number 1 in the country, without their starting quarterback, without their top 3 wide receivers right now, without their starting tight end, and then even with all the injuries that they've been dealing with on defense. Name me anybody in the country that would be in Georgia's position right now if they were dealing with all of that. Nobody. I mean, look at how big of a drop-off Texas A&M had to deal with when they had to put in Calzada as their quarterback. Now, I know he went and defeated Alabama, which, by the way, kudos to that young man because he played the game of his life pretty much. But still, the 2 games before that, the offense was looking really shoddy with him. And so having the asset of Stetson Bennett to come in while JT Daniels gets healthy, having the asset of having guys like Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, that's a big deal. It's a big deal that Georgia is showing off this amount of depth that they have. And so that even begs the question now of like, how good is this Georgia team going to be when they are fully healthy? If they are fully healthy, I should preface that. But when they are fully healthy, how good is this team going to be when they are at full strength? If this is how they're handling opponents now, when they're 14 guys deep on the injury list, how is it going to look maybe 4 weeks from now? It's absurd.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. I was talking to somebody else about that the other day too, and I was like, man, this Georgia team, not even remotely healthy right now. On defense, on offense, every side of the ball, every position basically. Like it almost feels like they were on their second string in so many different positions that like you don't even remotely feel healthy, and they're still now above Alabama as the number one team in the country, beating top 10 teams, beating top 25 teams left and right by double digits, 24 points against Auburn this weekend. I mean, it's unreal the amount of damage they're able to do to these other teams right now without being healthy. You look at the offensive side with Jermaine Burton, Darnell was playing a little bit more this Saturday, which was nice to see. You got to see him make a couple plays, even in the passing game, not just like the blocking and stuff in the offensive run game. He was able to make a couple plays that way, but you still don't have George Pickens. You still don't have Eric Gilbert. You're waiting for him to come back. So all of that stuff being said, they're still beating a team like Auburn on the road in Jordan-Hare Stadium by 24 points. And so that makes me sit back and do exactly what you just talked about and say, man, wait till they're healthy. When this team is healthy, Georgia's scoring, and this is off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. I can pull them up in just a second when I pass back to you maybe. But Georgia is scoring 40 or 39 or 38 points a game still after this Auburn game without those pieces. And then on defense, without their starting, players here and there as well, they're still only allowing about 4.2 points, defensively, not as a team. Because when you include like pick six and stuff, I believe it's like 5.2 or something like that. Yeah. But as a defensive team, like they're only allowing like 4.6 or something like that, points a game, along with the offense scoring 39, 38, something like that as well. And you go, man, this team is special. I sat back to several people and I said, please enjoy this game, this season, this team. You're not going to see a team that often, especially, with Georgia being this complete on offense with their backup quarterback, with backup wide receivers. Running back is extremely deep, but even at offensive line, now Sawyer went down in this game. Tate Ratledge went down the first game of the season, out for the entire year. You're not going to see a team this complete with this many injuries. And so with showing this type of depth very often. So as a Georgia fan, you've got to sit back and just enjoy this and have fun with the fact that Georgia is this good. We can sit here and nitpick at little things all you want. That's fine. I guess like that's just normal for fans. As Brooks Austin loves to say, a fan is a short for fanatic. So fanatic people aren't exactly the most logical sometimes. That's great. I'm a Georgia fan myself. You're a Georgia fan. This is extremely fun to watch, man. I don't have any complaints about this team from top to bottom. It's just exciting to watch.
Yeah, and I said this actually in an article this week that I posted, but a big thing is that the old saying goes, you can control what you can control. You can't control injuries. Injuries are going to happen. That's part of football. It's a very physically demanding sport. But what you can control is you can control how your team reacts to those situations. How do they react to adversity? How do your players react when their number gets called in big moments on the fly? How prepared are your players in situations like that? How prepared are they to go out and go against teams like Auburn on the road and just absolutely ball out? Latavius Brini being a perfect example of this.
He's
a preseason Nagurski Award final or a watch list nominee. Last year he was an All-American. Tyke Smith was, and you call Latavius Brini onto the scene. And he's just been absolutely balling out. I think he had 8 total tackles last week. I think he had 1 pass deflection in the end zone, preventing Auburn from getting when they were knocking on the door. And then on top of that, he had a tackle for loss. It's guys like that take for you to be able to rely on these second string guys and really put it all together and buy your guys some time to heal up. And the beauty of that is you're not having to put pressure on Tyke Smith or anybody to rush back and get healthy. You weren't having to rush Darnell Washington back into the lineup. You're not having to rush Jamari Sawyer if he's not ready to go this week back into the lineup because Broderick Jones will seal the edge and protect Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels' blind side. That's the beauty of this. And so it's allowing Georgia to get 100% healthy. They're able to be really cautious about these injuries. Nobody is – of course they're itching to get back on the field, but you're not having to pressure them. You don't feel like it's a do or die situation if this person plays, if this person doesn't play.
Right.
That's the big thing that's going on right now for Georgia and what's helped them get to the number 1 ranking and what's helped them dominate these opponents week in and week out. And it's the depth that Kirby Smart has established because of the recruiting that he has done.
Absolutely, man. And when you look at it too, like when we flip this over to the defensive side real quick, because we talk about offense a little bit more too. What's the best help for, losing one of your starting safeties like that? I don't know, maybe having 4 sacks and like 29 quarterback pressures. That's pretty darn helpful when you lose your starting safety. I mean, that does a good bit as far as making sure that you're not having your defensive secondary get scorched back there. And I believe this is the first game that even Keely Ringo was even giving up a catch all year. That's insane. This is week 6. So we're going to get onto that a little bit too as we talk about this. This is week 6. We're at the halfway point for Georgia. So when I pull out stats like, points scored per game for them being around 38, 39, and then points allowed by the defense specifically in like the 4.2, 4.6 range, somewhere in there. We're halfway through the season at this point. The comments have been made as far as the Georgia scoring defense and stuff like that, is they haven't played any good offenses. They haven't played any good offenses because those good offenses have had to play against Georgia's defense. The 6 teams that they played, Auburn going into this game, I believe had scored 41 points a game offensively. 41 points a game. Guess what? They scored 10.
I mean, just look at Arkansas and their matchup against Ole Miss just after they played Georgia. They were in a freaking shootout with Ole Miss.
Was that 51 points or something like that? I don't remember.
Yeah, something ridiculous
like 51 to 52.
Yeah, whereas the week before, they couldn't even touch the end zone. So, and then I think
they didn't score. They didn't score at all. They were shut out. End zone.
And then I think on top of that, I believe Arkansas was somewhere maybe inside the top 50 for total offense in the nation. They dropped all the way into like the 80s or something like that after just facing Georgia. That's how ridiculous this defense is. That's how elite they are.
Don't feed me that number, that statistic of Georgia hasn't played any good offenses. They've only played offenses that are like in the 130 range, 112, 110, all that kind of stuff. These offenses are ranked that low because they have played Georgia. That is why they are that low, because they have played Georgia. Not that Georgia hasn't played any good offenses. These teams, I wish I'd kept it on my phone. I might be able to find it here in a minute as well, but it was something about the statistics of the offenses they played. Each team they had played had scored 25, 30, 41 for Auburn, like that kind of stuff, points per game. And so you look at it like that and you're like, I mean, yeah, they were good. Then guess what? They had to play Georgia. So this defense is just top tier. You can't do anything but say that they are like the best defense in the country. And that's why I say as a Georgia fan, you got to sit back and just enjoy it. Man, it's unreal to see that kind of statistics. And like I said a little bit ago, man, it's when you have you lose one of your 2 starting safeties and, then you plug it in with a former walk-on, which I think he's still technically a walk-on, but I promise you Dan Jackson has a scholarship by the end of either before the end of the season or by the end of the season, like just afterwards. He's going to have a scholarship before the next semester starts because the kid is playing extremely well. He played immediately in the Clemson game, even when we still had Chris Smith healthy in that game. He was alternating into that game fairly often. And so he'll be able to do that kind of, assistance role for Georgia. He'll be on scholarship by the end of it. But my point of it is you plug in a guy that is a walk-on to fill in for it. And to be honest with you, you really don't feel a drop-off. I mean, that sounds like a Bama team. Georgia's always been trying to get past Alabama. And that's always been like the big hurdle for Kirby Smart, especially in the past 6 years. And one of those things. But so like it's so old to hear that kind of stuff. That's how they have a team like Alabama, man. They have a team where they bring in on walk-on players, and they're stepping into the lineup and playing meaningful snaps against teams like Kentucky, against teams like Alabama, Arkansas, who's ranked in the top 10, and there doesn't feel like there's a drop-off at safety. I don't remember a single play where Dan Jackson was just getting burned. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Dan Jackson doesn't seem to have any plays where he just got burned.
No. And that's what I'm saying is it's important to be able to have a player like Dan Jackson that you can always rely on. If Christopher Smith does ever go down, you know that Dan Jackson will give you a solid look and solid minutes at that position. And you're right. He may not make these flashy plays. He may not be like Lewis Cine coming over the top and absolutely doming a guy who's taken off across the field, but he's always in the right spot and he's always in his assignment like he is supposed to be. And then also every now and then he's good for a block punt in the end zone against someone like Arkansas and he gets you another touchdown. That's the type of player that Dan Jackson is, and that's perfectly fine. It's what Georgia needs right now. And then even adding on to the walk-on thing, I mean, Heck, Ladd McConkey didn't even have an offer from Georgia until the day of National Signing Day, I believe. They finally gave him an offer. It says a lot about Ladd McConkey. And then, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Kirby Smart and them are finding talent where they need it, and they're developing them. They're developing them immediately. That's the big key as well.
Absolutely. And to give those stats that I was talking about, I pulled it up. I did save a screenshot of this. I took a picture of this on the game on Saturday. And so like Clemson against other teams, 25.8 points a game, scored 3 points against Georgia. UAB, 27.8 points a game, 7 points against Georgia. And that was a pick six. So the defense didn't even give that up. That was a pick six by the backup, at this point, third string quarterback. So that wasn't even – so basically just count that as a zero. South Carolina, 24.8 points, 13 points versus Georgia. And 7 points of that came after a bullcrap, fumble call that wasn't a fumble for Kendall Milton, and they scored right afterwards in the fourth quarter. So garbage time on top of it. And then Vanderbilt, 20 points per game against other opponents this year, 0 points against Georgia. Arkansas, 35.8 points, 0 points against Georgia. And in this game before the Georgia game, Auburn, 40 points against other teams, 3 points against Georgia at that point, and so 7 points by the end of the game. When I took the screenshot, it was set 3. They scored a touchdown against Georgia with Tank Bigsby later in the game, and so they did score 10 there. So, but still, even a team like Auburn had scored 40 points against other teams, only with 30 points less against Georgia. That is a special defense. Georgia has been building this. Kirby Smart has a defensive identity. There's a saying that everybody used to say. You remember the saying, defense wins championships. Everybody's kind of shifted away from that in college football lately and said that, offense is the way of the game. Every single team that has won the national championship in the last 4 or 5 years has been scoring 35 to 40 points or more per freaking game. And so like you've looked at it, it's like, man, offense has really taken over and winning those championships for these teams. Yeah, I think that's the case overall. But when your defense is allowing less than 5 points a game, your defense is going to win you a championship. And right now, Georgia's in the perfect scenario to be able to win the national championship this year. Once again, this is not a show where I'm going to come on here and say Georgia wins the national championship right now. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Georgia has to make the playoffs at this point. And even as stuff, I've been saying that since before the season even started. You and I have talked about this. Even Kyle, when he came on the show with us, a while ago before, he has been talking about this as well. Georgia is a playoff or bust team this year. Now they feel like a national championship game appearance. Not saying they win it. Once again, I'm not saying they win it. A national championship game appearance, or it feels like a wasted season at this point now too, just because you've seen stuff play out with Alabama losing this weekend at Texas A&M. I mean, when you look at the field, because think about it, Penn State lost this week too because they played Iowa. So now you have Iowa and Georgia.
Who, by the way, lost their starting quarterback. Again, proving the point of how valuable Stetson Bennett is.
Nobody else has a backup quarterback like Stetson Bennett. I'll pass it back to you real quick just to give a little bit of appreciation to Stetson Bennett. Like, people don't have a backup quarterback like Stetson Bennett to step in the way that he has.
No, not at all. And point proven, like I said, Penn State, Sean Clifford goes down with injury. And you could tell from watching that game, as soon as he went down, that Penn State offense was not the same at all. And so would you have someone like Stetson Bennett, who, he is a drop-off from the talent that JT Daniels has. He does not have all the intangibles that JT Daniels offers, but that's completely fine. JT Daniels puts you in a position to win, and that's also in part because Todd Monken creates a game plan that allows Stetson Bennett to be successful and allows this offense to be successful with Stetson Bennett in the game. So kudos to Monken for being able to do that. And then also kudos to Stetson Bennett for being able to come in and just give Georgia a valuable. He's not putting up ridiculous numbers. He's not going out there and throwing for 400 yards. But one, he doesn't have to do that. He's not in the spot where he has to do that. And so when you have a defense like that, when you have a backup like Stetson Bennett, who, like I said, he's not this elite specimen by any means, but he is a solid backup quarterback that every team in the nation would like to have. I can guarantee you that it deserves some appreciation without a doubt. Stetson Bennett should, like Brooks made this comment, I think, Stetson Bennett should never have to buy a meal or another beer in the city of Athens for all that he has done for this university. Never again. That man should get everything he wants for free on anybody else in this city, because he, one, loves this university that much, and he has dang right earned it.
Absolutely. Yeah, my personal credit card is open for his bar tab. All he has to do is call me. All he has to do is call me. I got every drink he wants.
Copenhagen, Bud Light, whatever you need, Stat. I got you.
Copenhagen for his mid game,
Oh yeah,
cheekers that he's got going on. And, I mean, it's funny to catch to the sideline when he's been pulled from a game or he's been in for a while and you see him, you can definitely tell he's got to dip in. And it's just kind of funny to watch for your back because he's just having fun, man. This kid has been one that he came into Georgia as a walk-on originally, transfers to a JUCO, team, and then comes back to Georgia on scholarship later on. And then Georgia, as a Georgia fan, I remember when he came back. I remember when he came back originally, and I was like, hey, that's awesome. I love having the kid come back
cool
on
story.
scholarship.
It's a cool,
It's a cool story. But I also remember, think back to 2017. We do a lot of comparison, off screen. You and I have talked about this before about like the 2017 versus the 2021 team, defense, offense, all that kind of stuff. And we'll break that down later this season. I think we're going to talk about that, later this season and really evaluate those two teams comparatively. But I remember team players like Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy and people like that, even Roquan Smith. I think, at one point I heard him say something about like, hey, Stetson Bennett is the reason they were prepared to deal with a Baker Mayfield. He really helped them against Oklahoma because he was running the scout offense and he was really able to help them prepare for that game. And so when you see him be able to come back from JUCO back to Georgia on scholarship, and then now last year he played several games for Georgia, started several games. This year he started a few games because JT Daniels been dealing with his lat issue and his oblique issue. It's just been a fun story to watch him play like this, and I'm with you. It's something that I think he's underappreciated as a backup quarterback in college football, to where you lose a player like Stetson Bennett, and you're like, you know what? Our backup's still going to throw 231 yards against Auburn, and we're still going to be able to run the offense and run for 220 yards against them as well. I mean, man, what do you do with that? How do you stop that as an opposing team? If your offense can do that kind of damage with your backup quarterback, just wait until JT Daniels is ready to go again.
There is one moment that I think perfectly encompasses how not only the fans should view him, but it's how the players view Stetson Bennett. And I believe it was Auburn game last year. Stetson Bennett, home game, defeats Auburn. But like nobody saw it coming. Nobody predicted it. Like it almost seemed like Stetson Bennett did the impossible. So he's getting his TV time after the game. He's getting his interviews as he deserves. And Adam Anderson comes over mid-interview and is going, mailman, pointing at the guy, showing him all the love. I mean, every player was running by him, just showing him love. That just shows you how much those players appreciate him and the coaching staff appreciates him. They love Stetson Bennett. They see him as a leader. They see him as someone that they love, and they love seeing out on that field. So that's how he should be treated, because that's what he's deserved, obviously, by the players. So obviously the fans need to give the respect right back to him.
Fun fact on that too, when you bring that interview and after the game up, I was standing right behind the camera, literally like an inch behind the camera that was recording that on there as well. And it wasn't just Adam Anderson. It was I remember Nolan Smith came up right behind him. Every single player that walked by while he was doing that interview came up behind him and slapped him on the shoulder pads and was like just giving him all kinds of credit. And I remember that was the big turning point for Georgia fans even watching and being like, you know what? Stetson Bennett is doing pretty darn well as a backup quarterback for Georgia, and that he was able to just beat, Auburn at home like that. I know it was at home, so it's a little bit easier on there, but he really, really played very well in that game. And so now you've got him 2-0 against Auburn as a starter, by the way. They have not been able to beat him while he started the game. That's incredible. Auburn's not an easy team to beat overall. I think, the last decade or 2 decades at this point, Georgia's done pretty well. I think I was somewhat disputing, I'll say arguing with a Auburn fan before the game, a week or so ago. And I said, Georgia's 15-5 against Auburn over the last 20 games. That's pretty good, right? Well, guess what? 2 of those games came from Stetson Bennett at quarterback, our backup quarterback, a quarterback that you didn't expect to start a single game in his career at Georgia. That's impressive. And there's not many teams across the country that have a backup quarterback like that. And I'll use this as a moment to segue to that next section so we can wrap this up too and say, what other team in the country this year can say that their backup quarterback goes down like this and they're able to still be winning games by 24 points over a top 25 ranked SEC opponents like Auburn on the road. And that's where just miracles happen and stuff like that. There's no other team in the country that can do that, and that is why Georgia is ranked number 1 right now. That's why Georgia's ranked number 1. I know Alabama lost finally on this. They've been struggling off and on this year in general. There's a couple games they only beat Florida by 2 points, and Georgia is the most complete team in the country this year. That's not debatable.
No.
That's a fact. Like, there's a reason that they are the number 1 team in the country this year. There's not another team in the country that can say they are scoring 38, 39 points a game, and their defense is only allowing 4 to 5 points a game. There's no other team in the country that can say that. That's also played against top 10 teams, top 25 teams. That's insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And this is the big thing, and we'll get into this Alabama topic now because I think it's a great time to really address this. So all the buzz was going around just a week ago, actually, was that if Georgia and Alabama inevitably are going to be matching up in Atlanta, which is still looking to be true. I mean, I don't see a Nick Saban team slipping up twice in the regular season. I don't see that happening. And it looks like Georgia's very well going to take care of business in the rest of their schedule. So, but the big thing was that Georgia would have to beat Alabama twice probably to win a national championship in that scenario. But now they have 1 loss. So you go play them in Atlanta this year, you only have to beat them once.
Yep.
That's a big deal because, I mean, it's something, 1, Kirby Smart has not done during his time as a head coach at Georgia, and 2, something Georgia has not done in a very long time in general, even without Kirby Smart. So only having to go through them once now is a big deal. I mean, you get to be the team that takes them out in the SEC championship game, and then there's no Alabama in the top 4. So who's your 3 opponents going to be? Probably Iowa, probably Cincinnati, and probably either Ohio State or Oklahoma. Who are you taking in those 4 teams?
You're taking Georgia. You're taking Georgia every day. Every single day You're taking Georgia on there. And right now I think it's Oklahoma. Like, even though they barely win, they're just squeaking by the skin of their teeth, that kind of thing. They're still winning these games. And they just came back. I remember they were down by 21 points to Texas or something like that. I remember, I think it was 21 to Texas. And they came back this last week. And so they're probably going to just make it through. At this point, I think Caleb Williams took over for Spencer Rattler, which was insane. Nobody saw that coming this week as well, which I know that Oklahoma fans literally chanted it in the stadium the week before and stuff like that. But you don't just go for it just because, something. But they changed starters. He made the comeback for them and saved their season by beating, a Texas team like that. And I think they were a home team, weren't they? Oklahoma was at home.
It's neutral site.
Was it a neutral? Oh yeah, that's right. It was a Cotton Bowl, neutral site.
Yeah.
But he was able to bring the team back. So you kind of expect him. It'll be interesting this Saturday to see what they do as far as the starting quarterback goes.
Well,
I assume it's going to be.
Rattler is actually allegedly in the transfer portal already.
Yeah. Already?
Yeah.
Man, I'm out of touch this week. I'm out of touch. Yeah. I missed it. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. He got benched, and then guess what? Caleb Williams came back and won the game for them. So I'm not surprised that, you see Spencer Rattler potentially transfer. I'm not going to talk negative on a kid, so I'll avoid the overall talk. But go watch, QB1, and Spencer Rattler was on that. He was on there. Just watch that, and you'll kind of see the demeanor of him as a player and how he was acting in high school and stuff like that. And I am not surprised to hear you say that he's already in the transfer portal.
Or just listen to Brooks's MBR video talking about him. True. You'll learn everything you need to know about Spencer Rattler in that video.
He does. He gives a very, very good story. He did that in the MBR, right? That wasn't just something else we heard later.
That was MBR.
Yeah. So in MBR, he gives a very interesting story about watching, Spencer Rattler at a camp, basically. And it's just you're listening to him talk about it, and he's just saying something. Basically, to give a quick synopsis of it, the coach reaches out to him and says, hey, you need to be doing this like a game, and giving the energy and the level of effort and stuff like that as a game. And he just looks at him, he goes, but coach, it's not a game. Well, man, you practice, you play in a game like you practice. Every single practice, he gave the Allen Iverson, practice. We talking about practice? We talk about practice. That's what he gave to a coach at this camp coming out of high school that Brooks Austin went to. It was Elite 11. Was it the Elite 11?
Yes,
or I don't
Elite
remember.
11.
So at the Elite 11, he's sitting here telling one of these coaches there, he goes, practice? We talking about practice? But this isn't a game, coach. man, if you're at a camp and you're trying to show people exactly what you can do, this is a game. Like, this is real live
Every
action.
rep
You should be giving
matters.
every rep, man. But that's the kind of person you think of him being. And so I'm not surprised to see him jump over there to the transfer portal already. But then you look at Oklahoma dealing with all of that kind of strife. One of the top 4 teams right now looking to be, Iowa and Cincinnati and then Georgia. And the biggest takeaway that I had from this weekend as well, before you and I hadn't even talked until tonight this week, other than a couple text messages. And my big thought as well was the same thing you said a little bit ago, man. Georgia now only has to beat Alabama once. If Georgia can beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, Alabama is done. So now you don't have to sit here and be like, hey, if Georgia beats out, was it last week? No, it was last week. Man, last week you and I sat here and talked about this. And I said, Georgia has to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game or the national championship game. And so you almost think that you're not going to be able to pull it over on Nick Saban twice and beat him twice. Guess what? Now you don't have to beat him twice. If you beat him in the SEC championship game, he does not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So now you can eliminate that. Or maybe you lose to him in the SEC championship game. They do make the playoffs. You still only have to beat him once. There's no scenario where you're going to have to beat Alabama twice now. So if you were to be able to squeak by and beat him in the SEC championship game, you don't have to worry about Bama in the playoffs. That means you're now playing against Iowa, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati potentially. I like Georgia's chances there too. I know you said this a minute ago.
It's the most
I'm
ideal
on board,
situation.
man. This is the exact reason we came into this season saying that Georgia had to make the playoffs. Now I'm looking at it as like, man, Georgia has to make a national championship game.
Yeah.
If they don't get to the national championship game and play against a team like Oklahoma, or maybe even Iowa, I know I'm going to give them a little bit of credit. They're still beating teams like Penn State. I think they were at home against Penn State, but still, they still beat a team like Penn State, and Penn State beat Auburn, whatever on that part, which we talked about that already too. The Auburn win wasn't that big for Penn State, but, it was Big Ten football. They beat an SEC team. You got to give them a little bit of credit. That's fine. But the scenario is perfectly set for Georgia at this point, not only to make the playoffs, but to make a national championship game. I'm not calling it a national championship win just yet. I'm not going to be that fan or that media member. But at this point, if Georgia can't get to a national championship game, when are they going to do it?
Yeah. It's just setting up so perfectly for Georgia right now. And I know that fans get scared to think about that just because of everything that's happened in the past. And granted, yeah, your worrisome is warranted based on events that have happened in the past. But as we've been saying this entire year, it's not last year. It's not 2017. It's not 2018. It's not any of those years. It's 2021, which means anything that happened in the past it doesn't hold any sort of it doesn't hold any water to now. So it's just it was crazy because last week we were talking about how Georgia almost would rather lose the SEC championship game to Alabama because you got to think you're not going to beat Nick Saban twice in one season. It's crazy that you beat him once in a season. So now Georgia focuses on the SEC championship game, and that's all you have to focus on at the time, as they always do, week by week, all that coach speak, all that good stuff from Kirby Smart. So yeah, if not this year, you have to ask, whenever is Georgia going to make another national title run?
This year, man. It's this year. Like if not now, when? It's one of those things that this is the year for Georgia to be able to do it because you have a Clemson team that's not even existent right now. You have an Oklahoma team that is barely squeaking by on the skin of their teeth. You have an Ohio State team that's already lost the game. And so they're like essentially it almost feels like they're potentially out of the conversation right now. And then you have a team like, Iowa. And then you have a team like Cincinnati in the playoffs with them potentially right now based on the way it stands. And you're like, man, if they can't win it this year, when are they going to do it? Georgia has the most complete team by far. And that's why we broke this down earlier, 38, 39 points a game for a team plus only giving up 4 to 5 points a game. At what point do you be able to translate that over to winning a national championship, especially when a team like Georgia has been able to do a lot of that with so many backup players, especially on offense and even on defense several times with Tyke Smith not really playing still at this point and Chris Smith going down mid-game. Even, Lewisine went down a little bit in the Auburn game. Now I think he just got nut checked a little bit in that game. I think he took a helmet to the lower section there.
Yeah.
And so he was a little bit of pain. I think that's why he left the game. So he came back a little bit later. But it was one of those things, man, that you're like, if not win, or if not now, win. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. That's why I can't help but say this every episode at this point. The past 3 episodes, I think I've said this. Georgia fans, enjoy this. This is a special team. You're not going to have this, every single year. So don't sit here and watch the games against like Auburn and stuff like that and then complain about it. What's there to complain about? You beat Auburn on the road by 24 points. I don't care if they're a 1-win team in week 6 going into it. You take that. You do. You take that. It is a rival game that we play every single year. You take that 24-point win and you cash that in every single time. Every time.
Yeah, exactly. And so now you get to focus on Kentucky this week, who is probably honestly looking like Georgia's toughest test remaining on the schedule.
Yeah.
I know we still have Florida on there. As we say, crazy things happen in rivalries. But in regards to on paper, you're looking at 2 teams. Kentucky's probably your toughest test remaining on the schedule. So you got that game. And then you have the rest of the season, and you're halfway there already. I mean, it's flying by so fast already. So it's really important, to stress about, just enjoy it, man, because we spend all year. I mean, heck, since January, we've been on this podcast talking about college football because that's what we're passionate about. So we spend all year looking forward to this time, and it flies by in the blink of an eye. So
halfway
really
through it already, man.
Yeah, 6 games in already, 6 more left in the regular season. Surely there will be more after that, but still, just enjoy it, soak it all in, because this Georgia team is making history right now. So don't miss out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy watching it and going into a game like Kentucky. Once again, Georgia, it's a home game for Georgia. And crazy thing is, I'll come back from Vegas on Friday night, like 10 o'clock at night or something like that is when I come into Atlanta. So it still takes a little while to get home and stuff like that. Next morning, I'm going to have to be at Sanford Stadium, along with the time change and everything that I'm dealing with. On the grind. Going to be at Sanford Stadium, getting ready for that game and get to watch that in person again and be on the field a little bit. And it's going to be fun. And just to think about the fact that, like, you're facing number 11 team in the country, and Georgia is still predicted to beat, this team by 22 points. That's what the money line is in Vegas, where I'm at right now. Like, that's what the money line is. That's insane, man. What other team is like that in the country right now? Bama is the other team that had games like that when they went in. I think they were like a 14, 15-point favorite against Ole Miss, I believe. But you don't see that very often in teams like this going into big games like this. So sit back and just enjoy it. Personally, I can't say there's ever been a team that Georgia has had in my lifetime, which we're younger. I get that. I know some people have been around for a long time that watch or listen to this as well. Man, this is the most complete, most exciting team that I've ever been able to watch. I was in the stadium for the national championship game. My chest physically felt pain during that game when that ended. I physically could feel chest pains from that. And it's just one of those things, man, like I can't remember watching a team this complete. There's never been a Georgia team this complete in my life. So it's just one of those things you've got to just sit back and enjoy. It's fun. Georgia's going into this game against Kentucky, predicted to win by 22 points. It's a game that Georgia should win heavily. I don't particularly think it is a close game. 22 points, I'm not saying they cover necessarily, but I think that's pretty close. There's a reason they set that line right there. I think it could be close to a 3-score game, something like that, being 21 to 24-point game. But I could also see it being, a 14, 15-point game somewhere around there as well, like a little bit closer, enough to keep you on the edge of your seat. I think Kentucky's still in the game by halftime. I don't know what you think necessarily on this, but I think Kentucky's probably still, within arm's reach by halftime. But by the end of the game, it's one of those that I could see Georgia pulling away with like they did against Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really heavy set on saying out in front that I think Georgia's just going to dominate this game from the very start. I said that about Arkansas, and I felt pretty confident saying that about Auburn. And I'm feeling pretty confident saying it about Kentucky again, just because, yes, Kentucky has kind of modernized, as you would say, their offense, where as like years past, they had a guy like Benny Snell, and they were feeding him 40 carries a game. I don't think they're necessarily going to do that, but I still think they are very heavy predicated on the run. And as we know, Georgia's run defense is just out of this world elite. So I don't see them really being able to. And then if you turn this Kentucky team one-dimensional, they have their number 3 target on offense, wide receiver. He's going to be out for the game, I believe. So that's one less wide receiver that they're going to have. So I think if you make them one-dimensional like Georgia will, I think it's going to be really tough for them to get anything going. So, but all in all for this weekend, you got College game day rolling into Athens again. Second time in 3 weeks, third time on the season.
No, third time in the season, yeah.
Yeah, so just go enjoy that, enjoy the game, and enjoy the season because it is about to be over. It is about to be over before you know it.
That's crazy to think about, man. We're already rolling into the back half of this season. You know, the last 2 big games that are on the regular season, you're going to play against Kentucky this weekend. Like you said, College game day coming in. And then you're going to have Florida in a couple weeks, you know, down there. And actually, I just talked to my aunt who lives in Jacksonville. So we're getting some of our plans set up for that game as well. So I can come down there and stay with her. So I'm excited about that game as well. There'll be a lot of fun and everything. But I mean, after that, you know, the season almost will feel like it's over until we get to December.
Georgia Tech,
and then after
Charleston,
that,
Southern Missouri.
You know, you've got that in the back stretch of the season right there. And so it's games that you're going to roll through, it feels like. And, you know, if they can get through this next couple of weeks, you know, it's Kentucky and then a bye week, right? Kentucky bye week and then Florida. So if we get through the next 2 games, next 3 weeks, if Georgia can get through that undefeated, man, this Georgia team is going to be insane. That's all I'm going to say. If Georgia can get through those 2 games in the next 3 weeks, this Georgia team is something that you're going to tell your grandkids about. It's going to be something that, you know, you talk about for the rest of your life. It is. It's going to be a team like that. It's going to be one of those games. No, I don't think Georgia wins this year and then goes another 40 years without a national title. Kirby's not going to let that happen. He's going to be in a national championship contention every single year until he's not at Georgia anymore. He's going to be. I'm not saying he wins one every year. Nobody just wins one every single year. He'll be in contention for it every year. And so, but just enjoy that because we're in the back half of the season like we just talked about. And then all of a sudden we're going to be thinking about, you know, first weekend of December. And then we're going to be thinking about the playoffs right after that, a couple weeks in between. It's going to disappear really, really quick. We've already had it go by so fast. So that's why I keep saying, and I can't emphasize it enough, sit back and enjoy it. You know, personally, I'm having a great time. I have some little things that I've seen on offense, that I've seen on defense that I won't even come on here and say because it's not really worth talking about because of this team being the way that it is. I can nitpick all I want. Jonathan, you can nitpick all you want. It doesn't mean anything. You know, at this point, this team is special. It doesn't change anything at all. And so I'm going to sit back and just enjoy it. And personally, that's all I got to say. You know, we're halfway through the season. I'm going to let that wrap up what I have to say and kick it over to you real quick, just see if there's anything else you had to say for the halfway point of the season.
All I'm going to say is to piggyback on you saying enjoy the season is before you know it, it's going to be time to say goodbye to Jordan Davis. It's going to be time to say goodbye to Nakobe Dean, Adam Anderson. So really, I mean, just enjoy it because these moments you want to last. I promise. Don't look too far ahead and don't look too much in the past. Just be in the moment and enjoy it. That's all I got to say.
That's it. Well, as always, we'll let this wrap it up. It's about 54 minutes in so far, so we'll let this wrap up the episode. As always, keep it classy in the Classic City. From Las Vegas myself right now, so still in the Classic City, keep it classy. And I'll kick it over to Jonathan as well. Keep it classy there, and go Dogs.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Dogs Daily on Sports Illustrated. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Dogs Daily crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at Jeremiah_Stod7, to Kyle at DK Fubderberg, and Jonathan at 22_Jman. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime, go Dogs!